and welcome to Zone Defense. Be sure to follow us on Spotify at Zone Defense Podcast, on Twitter at Zone Defense Pod, and subscribe to our YouTube channel at Zone Defense Podcast, and be sure to ring that bell to get post notifications. Also, be sure to drop a comment down below and let us know your thoughts on today's topic and our other videos as well that we have out. And today it's just me and Roman. Drew, he's unfortunately under the weather. He actually put his picks in beforehand, minus the Pittsburgh-Tennessee game, which we'll get into obviously later on with the COVID news. But we'll shoulder on without him with just me and Roman. How's it going today, Roman?
I'm good, Chris. Obviously, week 3 didn't do the best wonders for our picks. It was a little bit sloppy, but we're going to bounce back as we always do. Our records are still looking quite clean, and it's still close in the running. So I'm just ready to get on with it.
I mean, yeah, clearly I'm absolutely dominating the picks with a clear 2-game lead. Could have been 3 if I did not pick the Denver Broncos over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which is probably my worst pick of the year. But we're going to completely forget about that because there is some bigger news going on in the NFL world. There's just a ton of news to get into, so let's jump into it right now. We'll start off with just talking about some of the quarterback situations in the league. I mean, we had Mitch Trubisky at bench after the first half of the game against the Atlanta Falcons for Nick Foles, who led them to a miraculous comeback. I really didn't even think he looked incredibly good in that game. I thought he got kind of lucky. But I think this is the last time we have seen Trubisky this season, barring a Foles injury. I think he is the better quarterback. I mean, if you compare anyone to Trubisky, they look like Tom Brady in his prime compared to Trubisky because he's just such a bad quarterback. It's so disappointing after being that high of a draft pedigree. But I think Foles is now the starter. I mean, you've seen spots where he's come in and made an impact for teams, such as the Philadelphia Eagles, obviously winning Super Bowl MVP, being incredible in that game. But also, I mean, I don't think Foles is some incredible quarterback that's just going to completely change the dynamic of the team. So, I mean, I think it's an upgrade, but it's not anything incredibly impressive, I guess. And then Tyrod Taylor as well, as I mean, it's not really his fault, but Justin Herbert's taken over the job. I mean, he had his getting his lung punctured or whatever, which is absolutely incredible story to me. I mean, it's just crazy how that would happen. But I also believe that this should be the last time we have seen Tyrod as a starter unless Herbert gets injured, because I think he's outplayed him and he's had over 300 yards in each game. But Anthony Lynn has an infatuation for Tyrod Taylor as a quarterback, and I don't think he's even close to the same talent. But he did go 1-0 with Tyrod and has gone 0-2 with Herbert so far. So maybe you see the switch back, but I think it should be Herbert. But how do you feel about each one of these two situations at the quarterback position?
Yeah, to start with the Bears, obviously putting Foles in after halftime made perfect sense. When you're playing the Atlanta Falcons and you can't put up points, that's a problem. But I do think it might have been a little too premature to make Foles the permanent starter. I know we've seen him more effective down the stretch when there's more playoff implications or when it's time to shine. He starts rolling. And if you have Foles get hurt, then you have to go back to Trubisky, and you already know his ceiling. So I think you should have waited a few more games, maybe until the bye week, kept Trubisky in. You could pull that move again where you put Foles in at halftime, but obviously you're kind of in limbo at the moment. So if you want to win now, put Foles in. He's obviously played better. And to go with the Chargers, obviously Tyrod kind of got lucky week 1. We both know that. And Herbert has been massively impressive. So I think they should keep rolling with him. But like you said, Lynn, for some reason, wants to keep going back to Tyrod when healthy. And we'll see if he does that later on in the season. Although I do think even though this wasn't like a playoff caliber year for the Chargers, I think you have much more to look forward to and a much higher upside with Herbert at QB.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more on that. I think Herbert is obviously the future. It's not Tyrod. I mean, that's just an absolute no-brainer thing to say. But he looks better than I mean, I wasn't super high on him coming in. I believe I was talking about this a little bit last week on the podcast, but impressed me. I mean, he obviously makes rookie mistakes. Everybody does. I mean, Joe Burrow's made plenty of mistakes as well, and I think a lot more highly of him as a quarterback. But I think Herbert looks pretty good. I mean, he looks mobile. He's willing to go deep. I mean, he's not perfectly accurate, but I mean, he's looked good when throwing to Keenan Allen for sure. He's really done wonders for Austin Eckler. I mean, we're not talking about fantasy quite yet, but Austin Eckler has really turned it around since he took over Herbert at the quarterback position. But so hopefully he keeps the job just for Eckler's sake, because I got him everywhere. So I really would like him to continue catching passes. But let's go ahead and talk about a couple teams that we're really not sure what the identity of them is. Are they a playoff team? Are they a fraud? We got the 3-0 Bears. We got the 3-0 Titans. I mean, two teams that have won a lot of close games so far, maybe gotten a couple lucky breaks. I mean, the Titans, their offense looks pretty good to me. I think Ryan Tannehill is doing a good job with them for sure. I think he's a solid quarterback. I mean, Derrick Henry finally got in the end zone a couple times last week. He's caught a few more passes this year as well, which is good to see. I mean, they've been without AJ Brown. That doesn't help, but the defense is a little bit worrisome, man. They have not stopped the run very well. I know they allowed over 180 yards to Dalvin Cook alone against the Vikings and almost lost that game strictly because of that. I didn't think Cousins looked particularly incredible. They also got torched by the rookie Justin Jefferson as well. So, I mean, definitely a defensive concern for the Titans for sure. But I still think this is, I mean, I think they're better than I initially thought they were going to be, but they have also haven't had the craziest schedule to start the year. So, I mean, this is a team that I think is going to be on the last few spots of the playoffs. I don't think they're winning this division, but I think they'll be in the playoff hunt for sure. And same with the Bears. I think this is a team that has started off a little bit better than I thought, but I wasn't insanely low on them this year. I saw a path where they could make the playoffs, and the Vikings look horrible. So I think the Bears also, there is a pathway for them to get in the playoffs. While I don't think they're a great team, the expanded playoffs, I think both these teams could definitely get in. How do you feel about the Bears and the Titans each?
Yeah, obviously those 3-0 starts put them in a good position to make the playoffs. If they don't make the playoffs now, it's going to be quite embarrassing. But in terms of the talent and the production on the field, they're both massive frauds. They could all be 0-3 right now, honestly. Um, and considering that the Bears now have Foles, I actually give them a good chance to win the next couple of games. Indianapolis next week, a Foles Brady reunion next week on Thursday Night Football. So that'll be quite interesting if he makes it that
Mm,
far. So I do think a Foles-led Bears team has a better chance to win, obviously, than Trubisky on the field. But that, as well as a 3-0 start, kind of puts them in a good position, even though they probably shouldn't have been in that position in the first place. And same with the Titans.
yeah, I definitely agree with that for sure. I mean, both teams that still have a lot to prove, but also are helped out by I mean, 3-0 start. A lot of teams do end up making the playoffs at 3-0. So, I mean, we'll see. There could be a collapse. There could not be. Plenty of season left to see for sure. But let's get into some teams that are definitely not 3-0. I mean, there's two that I want to highlight. I mean, first is on the screen for us, the Falcons. I mean, they could easily be 2-1, 3-0 so far this year. Just have had an absolutely couple of heartbreaking defeats after getting blowing teams out. I mean, winning these games so easily through three quarters and then just falling apart in the fourth quarter. I mean, it's just a continuous Falcons tradition to choke leads away in the fourth quarter. And I mean, you saw it again last week as well. I mean, just incredible, allowing Nick Foles to come in. And really, I didn't think he even looked that incredibly good in that game, but was able to get the job done regardless and win the game for the Bears to get them to 3-0 and drop the Falcons to 0-3 after the heartbreaking, crushing defeat to Dallas, which was even more, I would say, even more improbable than blowing the lead to the Patriots in the Super Bowl. But I mean, all three of those big time losses are just incredibly heartbreaking for any Falcons fans out there. But it's a team that I don't really see turning it around. I know that's kind of our caption after that. Any 0-3, 1-2 teams that could turn around. The Falcons are one team. I don't really think it's going to happen. I was a little bit higher on them than a lot of other people. I thought they might make the playoffs. I mean, starting 0-3, losing like that to some. I mean, Dallas is good, but I guess Chicago record wise is pretty good right now. But I mean, they still got some tough matchups on the slate. And I mean, they got to start winning games now and stop blowing these leads, or it's going to be over before you even have a chance to come back. And then the other team I want to talk about before I'll let you bring up some teams is the Philadelphia Eagles, 0-2-1. So it doesn't really fit either one of these criteria. But regardless, I mean, you tie the Bengals, you look bad against the football team. And the Rams as well. I really, it sucks because I like the Eagles. I like Wentz, but he's looked bad. Their defense hasn't been that great. I don't think they're making the playoffs either. Which I mean, in this division, it's not over for them until the season's over, so they could get in with 6 or 7 wins. To be honest, this division's horrible. But I just I don't really see it happening. I think the offensive line's too banged up. I don't think Carson Wentz looks good, and they have nobody to throw the ball to either. So, any other teams you want to bring up, or do you want to talk about any of these teams, Roman?
Yeah, I will bring up one team. I was add on to your point, though. I don't think the Eagles are making the playoffs, and like you kind of said, whoever makes it out of that division will probably be possibly under 500 or at right above that benchmark. So it's a tough division to be in, although it should be the Cowboys to lose at this point because they have played some great football as well. The only team in that division who is one 0-3 team I think has a chance to turn it around is the Texans actually, and they have a good jump start weekend game against the Vikings, who are also 0-3. So I think the winner of that game has a good chance to maybe spark something Although I do think Texans have an easier schedule, an easier division to play in. And so if they can get this win, that's huge for them. And I think it can boost them to maybe getting some wins going because they've had an absolutely rough start against some great opponents, to be fair to them.
Yeah, I mean, I know you're very high on Houston. I mean, I see what you're saying. I mean, 0-3, that's always tough to come by, but I mean, this is a chance to beat another 0-3 team, basically knock this other whoever loses that game is, in my opinion, basically out for the
Right.
playoff. And 0-4 is basically impossible to come back from. So this is a must-win game for both these teams, and I guess we'll see which one of them can come out of it unscathed. But we'll get into our next thing. It's kind of a little bit more player oriented. I mean, Josh Allen and Russell Wilson have been absolutely lighting it up this year. It's been incredible showings from both of them. I mean, Russ, I would say, is the clear-cut MVP right now. He's been absolutely nuts so far, just lighting up every defense. I mean, he's on a 74.7 touchdown rate for the season if he keeps it up, which obviously isn't going to happen, but that's absolutely incredible to see. I mean, Josh Allen's not too far behind him, man. He's been lighting it up absolutely. Hasn't thrown. I mean, he just threw his first interception of the weekend, but I think he's thrown 33 touchdowns and 3 interceptions the last 13 games or something like that, which is, I mean, that's incredible numbers from him. And he's completion percentage is up. He's not running the ball as much, but he's still been very effective running the ball in the goal line. A couple touchdowns, a lot of yards in week 1 at least. And Russell Wilson, kind of the same story. Really efficient passing, a little bit of running to add on to that, but both these two are definitely in the MVP conversation. Who do you think is going to end up winning the award, whether it's one of these two or just somebody else in general, which there's a guy I would like to talk about after you go?
Yeah, obviously you can't bring up the MVP conversation without Patrick Mahomes in there as
Yep.
well, who is improving every week. Kind of had a rough game against the Chargers, but obviously bounced back on Monday night. So obviously you have to include him in the conversation. But obviously Allen and Russ are putting up better numbers at this very point. And it's very surprising that Russ doesn't even have a MVP vote up until this year, and that's definitely going to change. He's the clear front runner. Although I do think Josh Allen, who I think has better games ahead where he can maybe prove his stock. I think once he plays the Patriots, and we'll see how he does against the Cam Newton-led Patriots. I think that kind of plays into the narrative of how the Bills and Josh Allen are going to be this season. I do think Seattle is going to run away with the division in the NFC West, but I do think it's more of a toss-up. So I do think it kind of plays into the narrative for Josh Allen if he wins the division. But it's anyone's game at this point. They're both really close.
Yeah, I mean, talking about Mahomes too. I mean, obviously, I mean, he looked unbelievable against Baltimore, and honestly, I think he's right in that MVP conversation as well. I mean, he's put up good numbers. I mean, not incredible for Mahomes, but very good numbers. And he played. I mean, I think he played the best game of all three of these guys against Baltimore this previous Monday. But I think he was absolutely incredible in that game. He looked. I mean, it was basically like, oh, Josh Allen, Russ, MVP, nobody else, and then Mahomes like, hold my beer. And he just came out and had an absolutely unbelievable performance. So, I mean, I think he's right there with these two. But yeah, I would go as well right now. If he keeps playing like this, there's no way anyone touches him. But let's go ahead and get some injuries. There's a lot on both sides of the ball. I mean, Chase Young and Iodinis, both problems for the Washington football team. I mean, if they're both out for, I know Iodinis is, I believe, out for the season now, but Chase Young needs to get back as well. I mean, he's banged up right now. Jarrell Casey also out for the season. That's going to really hurt the Broncos. They've been good in the run stopping game, and he's a big part of that. I mean, he left the Titans. They were good against the run before. Now they stink against the run, and he went to the Denver Broncos, who weren't good against the run last year, and now are good. But now with his injury, I expect them to be an easier team to run against. Dallas Goedert also, I believe he is out for there's no really timeline for him. I believe he fractured something in his ankle. He's going to be out for a while. Deontay Johnson, the concussion. We're going to talk about Pittsburgh, Tennessee before we get into our pick'ems as well. But I think this honestly helps him because he was dealing with concussion symptoms. So this can only really help him that they have their bye right now. So that's good for him. And Chris Carson, latest I've seen on him is he's actually getting some limited practices in after the mild knee sprain. So that's really good after seeing that awful play, clearly intentional. It really sucks because Carson's one of my favorite players. So I'm glad maybe he misses 1 week, but it's against Miami. That's not a terribly. It looked worse on the field than it was. It actually injury indicate. And then lastly, we'll talk about Chris Godwin, mild hamstring pull, but he's going to miss 1 to 2 weeks, maybe a little bit more than that. We'll have to see. But any of these guys you want to really address?
I'll start with Carson. At least we all saw the play. It was quite a dirty play, and
Oh yeah.
obviously he contributes heavily to what Seattle is doing. And although they don't have a tough matchup this week against a lowly Miami team, obviously he's great for fantasy owners and the Seahawks as a whole. Obviously, if you have Carlos Hyde or if he's on the waiver wire, pick him up. He could probably be useful this week.
Yep.
Same with Godwin. You're gonna try and find any replacement. It doesn't have to be a Scotty Miller who's also dealing with some injuries. Just find anyone to replace Godwin for the next couple of weeks because that's what it's looking like, and it's tough for the Buccaneers who just got him back from a concussion, I believe, and now he's out with a hamstring.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously been a lot of injuries this year. The Godwin one, I mean, it kind of this one's more fantasy implications. I think he's the best of the guys that aren't on the defensive side in terms of fantasy football. So a guy that we definitely have to monitor. You gotta be willing to replace him. So Chris Carson, Carlos Hyde's a decent replacement if he's out. But hopefully both those players can come back in short order. I mean, I don't expect Deontay Johnson to be. This isn't really a long-term concern for Deontay Johnson. I mean, once you get the concussion, I mean, maybe he gets another one and it's a big deal, but it's not something that is just re-injured by running around or whatever. If he got hit wrong again, yeah, maybe he gets another one. But once he's back, he's probably going to be good. The other two, I mean, the knee sprain hopefully would be healed as well, but Godwin, the hamstring pull, that's definitely concerning for me. I mean, he already had the concussion, at least the concussion symptoms for a little while. And then now the hamstring pull. I mean, that's something that could linger on all year. So hopefully not, because Godwin's one of my favorite players to watch in the league. So hopefully he can bounce back. But some other receivers, which he honestly should have been paired in this group as well. I mean, we got Julio Jones, Devontae Adams, and Michael Thomas. I mean, latest I've seen on all three of them is not really a lot. I haven't really seen anything about Julio or Devontae Adams practicing. I saw MTA got a limited practice in yesterday, but he's still, I'd say, up in the air if he's going to play this week. So I mean, I hope he's back. But for the Lions' sake, I mean, if he is, it's just more reason why they're going to get blown out this week after winning last week, which is incredibly shocking for me. But the other two, I haven't really seen a whole lot on. If you've seen anything, go ahead and provide an update for the listeners.
No, I think they're all kind of limited in their own ways. I think Adams kind of set out obviously Sunday night in
Right.
hope of playing this week. Hopefully there's more news that comes out today. But yeah, Michael Thomas did get a limited practice in. And on the other side of the ball for Detroit, obviously Trufant is also getting some practice back. So you could potentially see a Michael Thomas Trufant matchup, or Okuda would have to line up against him this week, but we'll see.
And those are matchups where even MT on a hurt ankle is going to dominate because these are not, I mean, they're not corners that can cover them. I mean, MT, one of the best receivers in the league. I mean, all three of those receivers, and then if you include Godwin, these are all top 7 receivers in the league. So, guys that we need back for sure. I mean, these are all guys that are very, very fantasy relevant, very relevant for their own offenses. I mean, Aaron Rodgers, apparently it doesn't matter who he throws the ball to because he's back. I mean, he looks incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Devontae definitely helps him out. I mean, Lazard, he's developing chemistry with him as well. I mean, after they didn't draft a wide receiver with one of their first couple picks, he stepped up for them when they really needed him to. But I think if Adams is back, that's big for him. I mean, he's been incredible, and this offense looks really good and way better than anybody thought they would be. But
yeah, speaking of Rodgers, obviously we didn't mention him in the MVP conversation, which is probably a mistake by us. But
yes,
obviously he's played some great football so far, and I wouldn't be surprised if he was a contender for that trophy as well.
yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think Rodgers has been incredible. He was awesome week 1. His stats haven't been quite as good. They still been really solid, but they haven't been quite as insane. But the fact that he's doing this without Devontae Adams for basically about a week and a half. I mean, they're 3-0. He looks really good. He's a guy you can't forget. He's definitely a dark horse MVP candidate, but he's another guy that you don't want to disrespect. He's definitely my top 5 candidates for sure, but a guy that hasn't gotten a lot of love for it and he definitely deserves some for sure. So,
Mm-hmm.
if there's anything, I don't think there's any other big news and notes coming up to Thursday morning. I mean, I guess we can kind of jump into the picks while still talking about the news and notes before we get into any actual matchups. I mean, with the COVID situation in Tennessee, I mean, they keep getting different players and personnel test positive. They had another, I believe, one staff member, one player test positive this morning. So the Pittsburgh game has been postponed. Both these teams will now have their bye this week, I believe, is what they're talking about doing. And then moving around a couple other things going into later in the season. So this is a game that will not be played this week. So we will obviously not. Drew had his pick in for it, but obviously there's no pick to be made this week. They'll probably play around week 7 or 8 is what I've seen. Maybe do something with Baltimore's bye as well because I know they have one around then. So I guess we'll kind of see how that goes. But there's also another game. This one's a little more interesting because they haven't been canceled yet. But Minnesota played against Tennessee last week. So they've been kind of shut down all week so far. And but they haven't had any positive tests, I believe, up to this point Thursday morning. So I think they will probably play this game against Houston. So we're gonna do a pick 'em for them. But I think there's definitely a less than or a greater than 0% chance this game gets canceled as well. I mean, maybe they err on the side of caution. They just cancel this game, but all four of these teams have a bye, and then they shuffle around the schedule however it needs to be done. But I believe they'll probably play this game. How do you feel about? I mean, first, give your thoughts on Pittsburgh versus Tennessee, and then do you think Minnesota Houston will play?
Yeah, obviously we were planning on picking for that game, kind of to expose Drew. He had the Titans winning that game, which I wouldn't have agreed with, but
Me either.
yeah, so it's kind of lucky that we don't pick that game. But as of right now, we're gonna pick Minnesota or Houston, and they're gonna play as of right now, which I don't know. It's a little bit surprising to me considering that if your facility is shut down for most of the week, how can you be expected to prepare for a game a few days later? But we'll see how that goes, and if they don't play, then we won't just count it against the standings, and we'll pick them when they end up playing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it was bound to happen at some point. I know people are freaking out about this, but I mean, we saw. I mean, Miami had the crazy outbreak. I mean, it kind of shut things down for a couple different teams that week or whatever. And then we had the Cardinals also with a crazy infestation for a little bit as well. But
In baseball, you mean?
yeah, I'm talking about baseball. Sorry, I didn't really refer to that, but yeah, I mean the MLB it went along pretty much as scheduled. I mean, obviously a few cancellations here and there, but I think this will be kind of the same story with the NFL. I think
Hmm.
Tennessee will be back again next week. I know they'll probably be shorthanded because these players that tested positive obviously cannot play for a few weeks, but the remainder of the team, I think they'll play on. I think this will just be a 1 week thing, hopefully, and hopefully won't spread across the league. That would really stink, but if someone got it because of a stupid decision, let's hope they learn from that and other people learn. Just can't be making dumb decisions, can't be breaking protocol. We need this season, man. I mean, this is
Hmm.
I left. I mean, I go ahead.
We also kind of have to see how the contact tracing work, which is something that they implemented for this season, which I don't think any sport has really put into effect as of right now. But obviously, they kind of had to use it for Atlanta when AJ Terrell got COVID and he had to sit out this past week. So I hope Atlanta is doing all right as well. But hopefully, they get the results they're looking for, and hopefully, this doesn't put the season too off track.
Yep, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, it's definitely something to monitor. I'm sure we'll be talking about it again next week. Hopefully, Tennessee's back instead of being in red on a blank line. They're back to playing. I don't know. I'm not exactly sure the Week 5 matchup is, but hopefully they're back to playing that week. So let's go ahead and get into our first game. An absolute barn burner, as I referred to at the beginning of the podcast. It's just an absolutely incredible matchup that I'm so excited for. The Denver Broncos against the New York Jets. I mean, this is just a battle of absolute powerhouse teams, and definitely must-watch TV. It's going to have extremely high ratings. I'm sure everybody's going to be tuning in. In an actual serious note, this is an absolutely horrible game. Probably the worst game on the entire schedule for the start of the season, at least at to this point. I mean, any game the Jets are in, if they're playing a mediocre to bad team, it's going to be one of the worst games of the year. But the big storyline for me in this game is there's some rumors coming out of New York that Adam Gase, if they lose this game, may get fired. And so I may watch this game just because I want him gone for the Sam Darnold's sake and Le'Veon Bell as well because he seems to hate him as well. So I'm kind of excited to watch to see if he's gone because I think it kind of unlocks a little bit more potential for those two guys as well as the entire team because I think Gase is one of the worst coaches in the league. But I'll let you go ahead and start this one off.
I actually heard the opposite of that report from Ian Rappaport that he's not in jeopardy of this game, whether he wins
Oh,
or loses.
great.
But obviously he's not going to help if they lose, and he'll probably get fired anyways. But I would have been more excited for this game if Denver was a full healthy team, and they have Brett Rippon going tonight. Obviously they have Bortles, but they're not going to go with him, and neither with Jeff Driscoll. So it's going to be a quite low scoring game. But there are
Oh, yeah.
some start the Denver defense for sure. And I have a question. I have a question for you, Chris. Do you remember what Drew said last week about the Jets?
I do not know.
I actually wrote this down as a quote when he said it. I said he said if anyone picks the Jets, I'll be thoroughly surprised. And in that very moment, I was going to pick the Jets for this week because uh, it could be a trap game. But then 10 seconds into the Jets Colts game, I immediately regretted that decision, and I'm going to go with Denver this game.
Yeah, I mean, I was also. I mean, I'm still considering picking them, but I'm going like I think this is actually going to be a pretty close game. I'm going to go with Denver. I don't feel great about either. I mean, if I pick the Jets, I say the same thing. I don't feel great about picking either one of these teams in any winning game. So I think both of these teams deserve to be 0-4. Maybe they'll just tie, and then and nothing will happen.
Maybe.
Wouldn't be shocking if they tie like 3-3. But that's gonna be a really low scoring game. And my honestly, before even recommending any teams, I would say if you're a betting man, bet the under in this game. The under is already at about 40 points, which is insanely low for an actual for a score or a predicted score for a game. I bet the under on that. I think it's going to be like a 15-point game. So yeah, really important stuff coming out of New York and Denver. Really excited to watch that game. But let's get into a game that I'm a little more interested to talk about. I mean, our hometown Detroit Lions with an absolutely shocking victory last week against the Arizona Cardinals. I did not see it coming. They played pretty well. I think the Cardinals also shot themselves in the foot a couple times, but it was nice to see guys like Jeff Okudah, Kenny G come back and make an impact for sure. It was really nice to see that. After Okudah had a brutal week in week 2, he was much better in week 3 and came up with the interception. So really nice to see it, and it was on Hopkins too. I mean, it's no cheap interception. Really nice play from him. And then the Saints. I mean, they haven't looked incredible this year. They're 1-2. So I guess that would be a team that definitely could turn it around, but I don't really even see them as a 1-2 team. They ran into the Packers at full strength, which actually that's not true. Devontae Adams was out, but Packers I see is the better team of those two. But New Orleans is also missing Michael Thomas. Andrew Brees doesn't look quite as good as he usually does. I'll start this one off though. I'm going to go with the Saints in this one. I actually do think this is going to be a fairly close game. After seeing the Lions last week, I won't completely trash them this week. I think they're going to keep this one pretty close, but I'm going to go with New Orleans in. If MT's back for sure, I think they'll win this game. But even without him, I think they can get it done.
That's interesting. Last week, Detroit got the win they needed against Arizona, a good up-and-coming Arizona team, as we all know. We all picked against the Lions, which is kind of our mistake, but I'm not going to make that mistake again. Obviously, I think Detroit's going to be a better team this week, and even though Hopkins might or Michael Thomas might be on the field, what is Okudah seen from Adams or Hopkins that he hasn't seen in Michael Thomas? It should be quite another game like that for him. And if we have a Trufant back on the field, that should help as well. Galladay also 100%. He didn't play 100% last week, and hopefully we get Swift involved this game. Obviously, Kamara is the big issue that we have to deal with, but I think we can get it done. Lions for the upset, baby.
Jeez. I mean, hey, it could happen. I mean, it happened last week. I'm not going to completely trash them this week like I did beforehand. I still think Matt Patricia is the much inferior coach to Sean Payton. I think this roster has less talent, but I think Detroit will keep it fairly close in this game. I think it'll be under a 10-point game, but I'm going to go with that. I'm going to go with New Orleans in that one. And then the next matchup is another one I'm pretty excited to talk about. Indianapolis Colts versus Chicago Bears. I mean, one team 2-1, the other one 3-0. I think the Colts have been a little bit underwhelming on offense, but I think their defense has been incredible so far this year. In Chicago, I mean, they've been fine. 3-0, not the most impressive way, but I mean, 3-0 is 3-0. They've gotten the job done. Nick Foles is there. New energy around the team. Who are you going with in this one?
Yeah, this would be a close game now that they have Foles starting, and I think whether Trubisky was starting or not, I would have picked Indianapolis. So that's still what I'm going to do. Although I do think this game is going to be closer than what people would expect.
Yeah, I'm also going to go with Indianapolis here. I mean, I was kind of hoping you would go with Chicago because you know how high I am on the Colts. I think their defense has been incredible this year so far, and their running game has also been good, including the offensive line. Philip Rivers is the only wild card in this one. I think he can do enough for this team to win games. And I mean, they're really banged up at receiver, but honestly, for him, which Michael Pittman should have been also on our injury list as well, had a really tough injury. They had to get emergency surgery on that as well because it could have been an amputation, I believe, is what I saw, which is insane. It was a traumatic injury to his calf. But anyways, like I said, they're really banged up. I mean, Paris Campbell out as well. They're really banged up at receiver, and I mean Jack Doyle's been out as well, so a lot of receiving threats, all banged up. But I think Rivers will do enough to get the job done in this game, and I believe they will beat Bears. And then now we're going to jump into and actually a game that I'm excited to watch. 2-0-3 or 0-2-1 and 0-3 team in the Cincinnati Bengals versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. I mean, it's Gardner Minshew, it's Joe Burrow, two bad defenses. This should be a fun game to watch, man. If you got some players in this game for your fantasy team, you should play them. I mean, it's going to be a really exciting game. But I'll start this one off. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go the same way as Drew did. I'm gonna go Cincinnati in this one. I think Joe Burrow gets his first win. I think they have a good week, but I think it's gonna be a good game as well. I think Minshew definitely has a chance to win. But I'm curious to hear who you got in this game.
Yeah, Jacksonville winning week one kind of gave us a bad impression of what this team was going to look like. Obviously, last Thursday they looked like the team who's going to get the number one overall pick. If it's not the Jets, obviously, but I hope Cincinnati gets their first win of the season with Joe Burrow. And after what Minshew did to me last week, I can't trust him again. So I'm going to go with Cincinnati.
Yeah, that makes sense for sure. I mean, Jacksonville didn't look very good. I mean, it looked good through 2 weeks. They looked really bad last week. So I'm going to go Cincinnati as well. I think they've kept things close to a lot of teams. I know they're 0-2-1, but they've played much better than that, and they've hung with some good teams for sure. But a game that is kind of equally as exciting for me because I'm excited for both of these games, but a lot better teams. The Cleveland Browns versus the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, you look at Cleveland. They since week one they've looked really good. Actually, I mean they've beaten up on the Bengals. They absolutely slaughtered the Bengals. I mean that was just an absolute shellacking for sure. And then they beat up on the football team as well, which is a better defense, but still not a very good team. But Dallas 1-2. They've had a tough start to the schedule, but also haven't been that impressive. I'm gonna let you start this one off. Who do you want to go with in this one?
I haven't picked Dallas to win a game all season, and that's going to change today, obviously. Playing a easier team, I guess you could say, from last week in Seattle. It should be a good game, though, as well. I do expect it to be really close, but I wouldn't be surprised if either team came out with a field goal advantage towards the end or something like that.
Yep, that's how I see it as well. I think it's gonna be a really close game. I think the difference lies in the quarterbacks. I think Baker is gonna make a critical mistake in this game and lose them the game versus Dak making a big time throw or a big time run or something like that. I think that's where the difference in this game lies. I think both these teams are probably playoff teams, and it's going to be a really good game. So I'm excited to watch this one for sure. Next game, I mean, this should be kind of a no-brainer for all three of us. Seattle versus Miami. I mean, Miami come out with an impressive win against the Jacksonville Jaguars, but they ran into an absolute buzzsaw on week 4. This one shouldn't take long at all from us. I'll go ahead and put it down while I'm talking about Seattle, how good they are. They're going to win this game. I know they may be without Jamal Adams. They may be without Chris Carson. It doesn't matter. If Russell Wilson's out there and if they have bodies that can catch the football, they're going to win the game. So, and you already put them in, but if you'd like to touch up on them, go ahead right now.
No, it should be close to a blowout, I believe.
Yeah, I believe as well. I think this will be at least a 10-point game. I think Miami, I think they're going to score a decent amount of points, but I mean, you can't really compete with Russ. It's going to be tough for them to keep it really close for sure. But let's go ahead and get into our next game here. The Chargers versus the Buccaneers was just another solid game, man. I mean, you got Herbert versus Brady. Two teams that I think are solid teams. I mean, the Bucs defense has honestly been their high point so far. They've been incredible on defense. Like their offense is still kind of catching up to their defense. They're without Chris Godwin. The Chargers as well are banged up on defense, so they've looked good on defense. I'm still gonna go with the. I'll go ahead and start this one off because the other one was such a no-brainer as well, and I'll go 2 in a row because this one also is kind of a no-brainer for me. I'm going with Tampa Bay. Kind of boring. I know me and Drew are kind of just picking the same teams every time, but all these are pretty chalk to me. Not really any hot takes so far.
Yeah, this does seem like another chalk week, but it just keeps us together in the standings at least. So I think we'll all be pretty good either way. But this game does have upset potential, I believe, and obviously, hopefully Herbert bounces back. Tom Brady needs to have a better game as well. But you did see in the last game he found more weapons. He targeted Gronkowski more. He got OJ Howard the ball more, which he has to do this week as well. And I think he does that. Should be a close game, and Tampa Bay comes out with a win here.
Yeah, that's how I see it as well. Next game, Baltimore Washington football team. Washington has been better than I thought, but Haskins has been horrible. And then Baltimore, I mean, Lamar's been a little disappointing, but they've still been solid. I mean, you already put them in. Not really a point to linger on it. I'm going with Baltimore as well. Another team that should win pretty easily. Let's go ahead and go to our next game, which is Arizona Carolina. I mean, Carolina's 1-2, Arizona 2-1. I think this is actually going to be a good game. I'll let you go ahead and start off. Kyler Murray is probably the difference maker for me in this one, but both these defenses aren't great. Both the offenses are solid. This should be a fun game.
Yeah, obviously Murray has to play well. Threw 3 picks last week against a defense who didn't have any turnovers up until that point, which is probably
Yeah.
his biggest mistake of the game. Um, he didn't run as much that last game I noticed as well, but if he does that and gets Hopkins the ball more, even down the stretch of the game, because he was targeting other receivers when he probably could have gone to Hopkins more. I do think he fix up the kinks and they should win this game.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Arizona as well in this one. I think they're gonna win the game. I think it's gonna be a close game because I think Carolina can keep their offense on the field a lot and score some points. But I'm this is another game that I'm pretty excited for this week. I think it'll be a pretty fun one. The next game is one of my favorite matchups of the week. Two 0-3 teams that are better than 0-3: Minnesota Vikings and the Houston Texans. Hopefully, this game ends up getting played. I think this is going to be a really fun game to watch. And these are two teams that basically have to win to survive and make the playoff and possibly make the playoffs. But I'll let you go ahead and start this one off because I know you love Houston. I'm assuming you're going to go with them.
Yeah, and for the Lions' sake, I'm gonna root against the Vikings in this game because if Minnesota goes down 0-4, it's not gonna get any easier for them because they go to Seattle, I believe, next week. So
Yep, they do.
Houston needs to win more, and I think they're gonna get it. It'll be close though.
And I am going to go with to be different from everybody else. I'm going to go with the Vikings because I think this is kind of basically a pick 'em game versus like I think the spread's really close to this game last time I saw. So I'm going to go with Minnesota in this one. I know they're on the road, but they're playing in. I mean, Houston plays in a dome as well. So and there's not going to be either very little or no fans there. So I expect this to be a really good game as well. But I think the difference is I think Dalvin Cook's going to run all over Houston, and I think they're going to struggle to get the run game going. But I think both teams are solid. I could see it going either way. So I'm excited to watch this one. Then the next one, New York Giants. Another disappointing year for them. They're horrible. They look even worse than usual. Daniel Jones does not look like the answer. They're taking on the undefeated the 2-1 Rams. Excuse me on that. Yeah, they had a tough. They had the victory, and then it was taken away by a questionable pass interference call, to say the least. But nonetheless, 2-1, looking for a win here. They'll get it. They'll get it here against the Giants. I expect this to be a blowout. What about you?
Yeah, this has blow potential as well. And the Giants got blown out last week by Nick Mullins, so I think you're getting a better offense this week, a better defense this week. Nothing's going to look great for the Giants. Nothing really to look forward to here on their side of the ball. But on the Rams, you start anyone in this game if you have them for sure.
Yeah, this is going to be this game. I think that one's going to get ugly. And then the next game, I mean, it's always a classic. Kansas City's playing some really good. They're playing some really good teams to start the year. They're really getting tested after the Super Bowl victory. It's the Chiefs against the Patriots. Chiefs came out, looked incredible against Baltimore last week. New England looked very good against the Raiders, I will say as well. But I'm going to go with Kansas City in this one. I'll start off with them. I think they're going to get the job done, but I think this is going to be a good game. So I'm excited to watch it. I'm excited to see what Bill can do to slow down Patrick Mahomes, if there's even anything you can do to slow down Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, I agree. Normally, Bill likes to take away your best weapon, which is Mahomes, probably Clyde as well. So I
See, they
have,
usually take Tyreek away. I would expect them to do that as well. They usually try to limit him. I think they're gonna make. I mean, it's not a very smart decision, but it's basically just pick your poison. They're gonna make Kelsey and Clyde beat them.
yeah, this is a tough one for me. I would love to pick New England just because it could be that way, but I just can't. I think I'm gonna go with Kansas City, and it'll be another great game. Though I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, this is. I mean, so far we've been very
Pretty
chalk.
chalk, yeah.
The only differences are you took Detroit and I took Minnesota just to be a little bit different. I mean, it also would have helped to have we had Pittsburgh, Tennessee, because Drew took Tennessee. I was going to take Pittsburgh, and I'm sure Roman.
Same.
So that would have been a little different as well. Would have been a little more exciting. Another game that I'm pretty excited to watch: Buffalo versus Las Vegas. I mean, Las Vegas is home. They've looked pretty good so far. They're playing the Buffalo Bills, which have weirdly looked really good on offense and really bad on defense, which is kind of unexpected for them going into the season. I thought their offense would be similar to last year, and their defense would still be really good. But I'll let you start this one off. So I think this is a good game and has a chance to go either way.
I don't agree with that because Las Vegas is gonna be out Ruggs probably, and they're gonna probably be out Brian Edwards as well. Even Jacobs got the questionable tag for this week, although I do think he will play. Buffalo's just been too good, too overpowering, and when you beat a Rams team, you kind of get my attention. So I'm gonna go with the Bills.
Yeah, I'm also gonna go with the Bills in this one. I think it's gonna, like I said, I think it's gonna be a good game, but I also love the Bills. I like Josh Allen a lot. I mean, I was kind of crapping on him before the season, but he's fun to watch. There's no question about that. I definitely enjoyed watching him. It was just a question if he can really improve. And I mean, you see by the news and notes. I mean, he was on our MVP sheet for a reason. He's been incredible to start the year in a couple softball matchups and then against a really good Rams defense. So he's proven that he's the real deal this year, and I expect him to continue to prove that in Week 4. So let's go to the next game, which is I think this is going to be a fun game to watch on Sunday night. Philadelphia, San Fran, two teams that are extremely banged up. I mean, you look at San Fran's defense, they're banged up. You look at Philly's offense, they're extremely banged up. That's going to be a matchup to watch for sure. I'll go and start this one off, and I'm going to go with a different pick than Drew went for the San. He went with San Fran. I'm going with Philly. I think they need a win. I think they're going to get a win this week against San Fran.
I was highly regretting that Philadelphia pick last week towards the end of that game because, while they did have so many chances to win, it looked like Cincinnati was going to pull it through. And I was actually talking to Drew. You can vouch for this. I thought he was going to get that pick right, but it ended up becoming a tie for all of us, which is what you can see on the standings right there, which we'll get to a little later. But it's just really embarrassing for the Eagles. It's tough for them. It's not going to get any easier as well. I'm going to go San Francisco this week.
Yeah, I mean, I don't blame you. I think they're the more chalk of the two. I figured I got the lead. Why not try to reinforce it a little bit? I think this is a game that could go either way. I'm really hoping Philly's offense steps a little bit. I think it's going to be a little bit more low scoring than I see when I look at these two teams. I'm like, this is probably going to be a high scoring game. And then I kind of think about the situations, and I think it's going to be a little bit more low scoring than that. But we're gonna find out in short order. And then another game, which I actually believe this is another game that this could be a trap game for the Packers. Playing at home against Atlanta on Monday night. Atlanta desperate for a win. Their offense is very high powered, but I'm going to go with Green Bay in this one. I'll start it off with that. I think it's going to be a fun game to watch. Definitely something I'm going to tune into. Another really good Monday night game. But yeah, give me the Packers.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to agree. I would love to pick Atlanta here. Just how I almost predicted that upset against Dallas a couple weeks ago, but I just don't have the energy to do it this time. I can't really believe that they'll be a good Packers team, a better Packers team than what Dallas was at the time. It should be Green Bay's game to lose. Although, like you said, I can very well see it being a trap game.
Yeah, definitely going to be a fun one to watch. And I mean, if you look at our sheet, pretty much the same colors across the board. So I mean, another week where there isn't a lot of insane pick'ems here. I mean, hopefully a couple of these. I hope a couple of these teams get upset, to be honest, so we can maybe go with some different options next week. But it really looked. The slate looked really chalk to me this week. I had a tough time even picking the two upsets that I did. So we're gonna find out about both of those. But let's get into our fantasy picks, the last segment of the day. I'll let you go ahead and start off with your first one.
Yeah, this is a quarterback that I should have started on my own fantasy team last week instead of Gardner Minshew. It's Jared Goff, and obviously we kind of
Like it.
mentioned that it has a blowout potential. I have Woods on my team as well, so I will be starting both of those players. It should be a great game for both of them, and Goff has been quietly underrated this season. Not putting up points like Allen or Wilson is, but still in the mix as well. Probably finish the top 10 quarterback of the season, and I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do at home with all his weapons. And I'll be thoroughly disappointed once again if he doesn't pull through like Minshew did last week.
Yeah, I expect Goff to finish inside the top 10 this week and throughout the season. I mean, it's weird because they threw the ball so many times last year, and yet Goff was horrible for fantasy. This year they've really run the ball a lot more, but he's been a lot more efficient in the red zone. He scored a lot. They've had a lot more passing touchdowns to go around inside the red zone. He also ran one in last week. That helps. I don't expect him to do that again, but I can easily see 300 yards and 2 touchdowns at least. I don't think he's going to turn the ball over much this game either. This is a very safe pick. A pick that I like a lot, a guy that you should, if he's on your waivers and you have Carson Wentz or Drew Brees or something like that, go ahead and pick him up and stream him this week, man. I think he's going to have a really solid week. So I love the pick here for sure. I think he's going to finish inside the top 10 this week. I'll go ahead with my first pick, and this is a guy that Roman recently traded him away in his fantasy league for Chris Godwin, which he's banged up now. I'm going to go DJ Moore in this one. I think this is a boom week for him, man. I mean, I think people are hating on him a little bit too much. If you look at I really haven't seen anyone talk about this at all on any podcast I've listened to. He started off last year kind of rough as well. He had In week 1, he only had 7 targets, which this year he had 9. Week 2, he had a good week in both. With I believe he had 10 and 12 targets. He had 10 last year, 12 in week 2 this year. And then week 3, he had this weird disappearing act where he had 2 targets last year. He caught 1 pass for 53 yards and a touchdown. And then this year he had 2 receptions for like 60 yards and no touchdown. So a kind of bad week 3. And then after that, it was just he had a kind of a mediocre week 4, and then it was just smooth sailing after that. I expect him against this defense to go to work this week. I think he's going to be a top 10 receiver this week, especially in PPR if he doesn't get in the end zone, which I don't really expect him to. I just don't think he's a touchdown scorer. But I think in PPR, this is a guy you need to put in your lineup. I know it's been frustrating, but it's a guy that I'd be willing to buy low on. I think he's going to have a solid rest of the year.
Yeah, for DJ Moore's sake, I hope he has a good game as well. All his owners have every reason to be upset at him,
Yeah,
aka
definitely.
me, which is why I traded him away. But although I got Chris Godwin, I'm pretty happy with that. But ultimately, you're gonna have to juxtapose him with where he was going in the draft. You know, a fourth round pick, and then you look at Calvin Ridley, who went a round or two later, who's having a monster season so far. So when you kind of juxtapose those two together, you're kind of a little upset with that, how you could have had the potential of Ridley. But like you said, you know, Moore doesn't normally take off at the beginning. He kind of finishes down the stretch, which, you know, I hope is the case because Bridgewater is going to need him. Robbie Anderson has also been in the mix for Carolina, and without McCaffrey on the field at the very moment, you kind of have to target all the weapons you can, which is why I do think Moore, like you agreed with, could have a good game this week.
Yeah, I think Moore is still a great receiver. I think he's clearly better than Robbie Anderson as an actual talent.
Right.
Has been solid so far this year, but they've also been. I mean, they've been in some tough matchups so far. I mean, the Bucks have been a tough pass defense. I know Anderson was solid, but he also wasn't that good last week either. I think people are kind of forgetting about that. He only had 7 targets in that game as well, and he also was not getting shadowed by Casey Hayward the entire game like DJ Moore was. So I'm not as worried about him as a lot of other people are. I don't think it's time to panic in the streets, but if he does not perform this week, at least with 7 for 70 or so, that's when I would start worrying. If he doesn't put up at least 14-ish PPR points, that's when I would start freaking out about him. But I'll let you go into your second name now.
Yeah, just to finish up on Moore real quick, I'm sure many more owners have been testing the waters with trades in the past couple of weeks, but obviously if he
I
doesn't
went
perform,
after him, so
if he doesn't
yeah.
perform this week, then I definitely pull the trigger on a trade, buy low or on him as if you can. But last week my second pick was Noah Fant, who was all right, not too great, but he was all right. Although he does have a great matchup this week, tonight, I'm gonna go with another different pick, different direction, a wide receiver, Tyler Lockett. Great game last week, and I think he's gonna perform well this week as well. There's plenty of points to be had in this game, so I do think he gets targeted quite a bit. Not really sure what's the deal with Byron Jones as of right now. Maybe you can update me on that, Chris. But
I haven't seen
um,
anything on him now.
yeah, so it should be a great game for Lockett once again. Had a monster game breakout last week with 2 or 3 touchdowns, I believe.
He had 3 touchdowns in the first.
Yeah.
An
So
absolutely incredible game for him.
I,
I
I
mean,
don't. Yeah, I don't think he'll get 3 touchdowns this week, but he'll definitely get you enough points to be more than enough satisfied with him.
yeah, Lockett's a guy that absolutely needs to be in your lineup no matter what. He continues, including by me, gets underrated by the fantasy community for some reason.
Hmm.
He's always a top 12 receiver, but yet gets drafted outside the top 15. It makes absolutely no sense to me. He's always like a fourth or fifth round pick and continues to outperform. And I see him on the board, and I do the same thing. I take guys like DJ Moore, I take guys like Amari Cooper over him, who are worst receivers, both on and off the fantasy landscape. I think he's a better receiver than both of those guys and many other players that get drafted ahead of him. So Lockett's a guy that you're putting in your lineup no matter what the matchup. But when it's this good, you're starting with the utmost wide receiver one confidence. He's going to go off this week again. I think he's going to have a solid week. But I'm going to go right across the board in that matchup. I'm going to go with the wide receiver one for the Miami Dolphins. I'm going to go with Devontae Parker. I think he's due for a big week. He's going to get a big week. Seattle is just bleeding points to the wide receiver position. I believe they're number one right now in fantasy points allowed at wide receiver position. Every week they're getting absolutely torched by wide receivers, including guys like Julian Edelman running down the field on streaks. I mean, if you can't stop him on a streak, then you can't stop anyone, man. I am very confident Vontae Parker finishes as a top 15 receiver this week and a guy you absolutely need to get in your starting lineup in any way you can. Start him over. I would probably start him over DJ Moore at this point this week. I think he's going to have a big week, but I think both are very good starts.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised though if Miami doesn't score more than like 20, 21, but any points they score will probably come from Devontae Parker or Gasecki, who had a touchdown last week. Um, But yeah, even if I don't think Parker needs a touchdown to sustain a good fantasy day. He could probably get a bunch of those yards in return. And any touchdown obviously helps him. So that's a good pick. And a team that could be playing behind the whole game is definitely going to score some garbage time points.
I mean, yeah, I don't expect. I think Miami's going to score more points than you say, but because I think it's going to be probably like 42-20. I think it's going to be a really high scoring game, but I don't think Seattle can stop anybody either. But I expect Parker. Yeah, I expect him to get a high. I expect him to go over 100 yards. Maybe he doesn't get in the end zone. I expect him to get at least 6 receptions for 100 yards in this game, and then if he finds it, it's going to be a really good start and be a wide receiver one. But even if not, I think he's at worst a high end wide receiver two for me this week.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Some great picks this week as well for all of us.
Yeah, I think these are solid picks. Before we close it out, I'm just gonna go ahead and after I finish this, you can summarize yours as well. I'm gonna summarize my picks from last week: DK Metcalf and Jerick McKinnon, and I mean both those I consider smash plays. I mean McKinnon found the end zone. I know he came up with the rib injury, but in PPR he had about 17 fantasy points, which is very good. And then DK Metcalf was one boneheaded decision away from being one of the best, easily the best. I would say probably the best start of the week out of any of them.
Yeah, that was rough.
I mean, if he comes down with that ball, he ends up with 27 fantasy points or whatever it was. Instead, has a 19-point performance, goes over 100 yards again. I had him on my fantasy team last week. I ended up trading him away because I think, while I still think he's a very good receiver, I think he'll have a very solid season, be top 15 as a receiver. I think the touchdown, he hasn't been getting the craziest amount of volume, so if he doesn't get in the end zone, you may be a little bit disappointed with a 10-point performance or so. But he had another really good week, and he's had 19 points each of the first 3 weeks in full PPR. So a guy you can definitely rely on in your starting lineup. But McKinnon as well, I like that pick. I think both my picks were. I may have had the best 2 starts of the week of anybody so far after a couple of rough weeks.
Yeah, for me, I don't really remember what Drew's picks were. Maybe you remember, but for me, obviously Minshew did not pan out at all. Even though he was highly regarded for a top streamer of the week, he definitely disappointed many people, including myself. Um, I can't trust him ever again, I don't think. And then my second pick was Fant, who was all right, but obviously has a juicy matchup tonight. I hope he scores a couple touchdowns in a what could be like a, I don't know, 14-7 game. I really don't know.
Yeah, I mean, Fant. I like Fant again this week. He wasn't awful last week. He didn't crush you. Gardner did though. That was a rough
Yes.
one.
Yeah.
But everybody has bad picks. I like yours this week. I think they're going to bounce back. I mean, Lockett. There's no reason to expect him to be anything other than a wide receiver one. And actually, before we hop off, I just got news that said the Vikings are actually reopening their facility today after recording no more positive tests yet again. I think that game's gonna be played, it's gonna be one of the better games of the week. So I'm very happy about that. Let's get your opinion on that before we wrap it up.
Yeah, that's good news that they're going to play and they haven't been affected by the Titans. I'm excited for that game because obviously there's huge implications. Despite it being 2-0-3 teams against each other, they both need them. They both need a win. Kirk Cousins need to step up a bunch. So I wouldn't be surprised if Minnesota wins that game, but I would have to agree with Drew that Houston is going to win this as well.
Yeah, honestly, I might have gone with Houston if one of you two would have gone with Minnesota. I just wanted to be a little bit different. I think this is basically a pick 'em versus a game where there's a team that's favored or not. I think both these teams are pretty similar in I mean, they've proved it so far, both 0-3, but both teams that I expect to be better than that throughout the season. But yeah, if that's it for all of us, we're the Zone Defense Podcast. Again, subscribe to our YouTube, follow us on Spotify and Twitter at Zone Defense Pod, and search us up at Apple Podcasts as well. We're on there. Anywhere else you listen to your podcast as well. I mean, Google Play, music. We got other places as well. I mean, hit us up right on YouTube, like we said before. But really fun episode this week again, Roman. Thanks for coming on. And everybody, thank you for listening to the episode. We're the Zone Defense yet again. Peace out.
See ya.